Hey guys, Harley here for another episode of The Landing Pad. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the Disney comics. Everybody, of course, knows Disney, Disneyland, Walt Disney himself, and all their fabulous movies and characters. But today we're going to be talking specifically about basically the early days of Disney himself and how he actually got into comics. Walt Disney came to California with his brother in about 1923. They came over to California to try to be cartoonists. I myself, being a Disney cast member previously for 2 years, I know a lot about the history of the park. I did an internship with them as well. And what they always would tell us is that Walt packed a single suitcase, had $40, and went off to California to try to accomplish his dream. He came here originally to be a cartoonist, to be an animator. And him and his brother actually started Walt Disney Brothers Cartoon Company back in about the mid-1920s. In 1932, they had their first comic strip, which was actually Silly Symphony, which, as we know, eventually became the first all full-color animated short that they did as well, with sound included. Alright, so in 1932, when Disney first did his comic strips in newspapers, his little Sunday strip, he did Silly Symphony, he did lots of Donald Duck, and he of course used the one and only Mickey Mouse. Eventually in their Sunday strips, they started doing adaptations of Disney movies and stories that they'd gotten from different fairy tales. So basically they did adaptations of Cinderella, of Alice in Wonderland, all in the Sunday newspaper for kids to read. Eventually, Disney decided to start producing actual comic books. He took lots of his comic strips that he did in the newspapers, and a lot of them actually got reformatted and colored and put into comic books, like the ones we see right here. So they had some great ones. I actually had this comic when I was younger, surprisingly, because this is from, I think, the 50s. And for some reason, Donald was always like cooking on like half the covers. And I remember as a kid seeing him flipping pancakes and eggs, and whenever I saw that cover, I was like, oh man, I really want some pancakes and eggs. Now, Disney was really lucky, especially with his comics, that he got to work with Walt Kelly, who really kind of stylized a lot of what we consider like a Disney-style cartoon, especially in illustrations. But of course, he also worked on Fantasia, Pinocchio, and a bunch of other things. He was famous himself for specifically working on his little comic strip in the newspaper called Pungo, which is this tiny, cute little like kind of possum-looking guy. And of course he did a lot of cover art for all the Disney comics that were printed by Dell, and some of the interior art as well. Disney came a long way. I mean, from going in the 30s to doing his cartooning and his comic book strips, up to the 1940s when they started doing the full comics like we see here. He started going from comic strips, comics, animation, adapting some of those into the actual cartoons that we've seen, like Silly Symphony, which is one that a lot of us know, to going towards building a park. Now that's a big, huge leap to go from making cartoons to Disneyland. There wasn't a lot of ways to cross-promote back then, but I guarantee that Disney did every single one of them. Not only did he work with ABC to get TV spots to tell everybody about Disneyland in 1954, a year before the park actually opened, when it was already under construction, but he actually cross-promoted in the comics. He used a lot of his comic books to advertise for what he was doing, for his projects, for his characters, and for the park. As we see here, we have this beautiful comic that's Christmas in Disneyland. And inside's a lot of stories including Santa going to Disney, along with stories with all of his characters like Mickey and Donald. But on the cover, he would do actual photos from the park. It was an easy way for him to advertise his park, his dream, by using comics and stories, getting right to those kids who are the young readers, who are the ones who are gonna want to go and enjoy the park. I actually did a marketing internship with Disney when I was there. And one thing they talked about in our internship is they talked about the history of marketing in the company from the beginning to today. Even then, when he was very young and starting out as a cartoonist, he knew what to do. He knew how to cross-promote. He ran the company the same way for years and years, and after he was gone, they still try to run the company the way that they think he would. So another way that Disney did lots of cross-promotion, of course, for the park, not only in comics, was actually through the park and through ads. One of the main things they actually did back in the 1970s, when they first were about to open Walt Disney World, in 1970 they got together with the Florida Citrus Commission and created a whole new character. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called the Orange Bird. Basically, it's this tiny, cute little bird with a big orange for a head with two little green leaves on top. And he actually doesn't speak, ever. He just has little thought bubbles in orange smoke that come above his head. And basically, they used him as a way to cross-promote with Florida, with the Citrus Commission, into the park, and to spread Disney and a new Disney character out into the world. So basically in the park we had, kind of like near the Enchanted Tiki Room, was the Tropical Serenade, where they sold orange juice and orange themed treats with a little bird standing above telling you to buy them. But it was a really interesting relationship, and it was a character that they created purely for promotional purposes, not like having Mickey come in, or like they had Donald Duck, who actually they did Donald Duck orange juice, which actually is still sold today, and it's one of their longest lasting brands. In about 1986, the Orange Bird actually disappeared, and they didn't have really anything except for a handful of merchandise. There's a lot of rumors of why that happened. Partly to do with Anita Bryant, who was actually the spokesperson along with the Orange Bird and sang lots of the Orange Bird songs. But there's been rumors that they were even asked to destroy any artwork or promotional material that they had that had the Orange Bird on it. And actually we have a little piece from the Orange Bird here at Blastoff. He went from literally doing a Sunday comic strip with his brother in a company that they made in a garage in Burbank, to having the most successful comics in the US in the 50s, to then creating a park, creating movies, creating films, and taking all these characters and making them really come to life. And it's even crossed over to today, even though he's not alive anymore. Now Disney owns Marvel and all of those comics and those stories and those characters, which they're doing the same thing with. They're trying to bring more of it to you, more of it to people, and more of it to life. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of The Landing Pad. Don't forget to visit us here in our North Hollywood location. Also visit us online at blastoffcomics.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. And again, don't forget, if you want to wear the cape, read the book first.